Garrett Sullivan's truck made the sound, that grinding death rattle wheeze that meant the battery had surrendered for the fourth time this week. He sat motionless in the Hayes Industrial Solutions parking lot, hands still gripping the steering wheel, every fiber of his body screaming for rest. 20 hours. He'd worked 20 consecutive hours, and the dashboard clock glowed 11:43 p.m. like an indictment. His phone vibrated against the console. Casey. His sister's name illuminated the screen with the promise of disappointment he'd already anticipated. Garrett, Breslin's been sobbing for the past hour. You said 6 o'clock. It's nearly midnight. The words landed like physical blows. I know. Battery died again. I'm trying to. She made you a drawing, sat by the window all evening waiting, finally cried herself to sleep 20 minutes ago. Casey's frustration carried the weight of 3 years of watching her brother self-destruct through overwork. When does this end? When do you stop killing yourself for a company that doesn't give a damn about you? Garrett pressed his forehead against the steering wheel, the metal cold against his skin. October in Pennsylvania meant winter approached, which meant higher heating bills, which meant more overtime, which meant less time with the only person who mattered. The mathematics of poverty never changed. He always lost. I'll figure out the truck. Be there soon. You need help, not just with the truck, with everything. Amanda wouldn't recognize what you've become. Amanda, the name still carved hollows in his chest 3 years after cancer had stolen her. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral, and in that sterile hospital room while machines counted down her remaining minutes, Garrett had made a promise. Breslin would never want for anything. Their daughter would have the life Amanda had dreamed of giving her. He was failing. The knowledge sat in his stomach like swallowed glass. A sharp knock on the driver's window launched Garrett's pulse into panic territory. A woman stood in the parking lot shadows, backlit by distant security lights. She held jumper cables with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to solving other people's problems. Even through the dirt-streaked glass, Garrett registered expensive suit, sharp features, the bearing of authority worn like armor. She made a rolling gesture. Pop the hood. Garrett cracked the window an inch. I don't need Mr. Sullivan. She pronounced his name with the precision of reading from a document. It's 11:47 p.m. Your daughter is waiting at 342 Elm Street. You can pop the hood and get home in 15 minutes. Or you can sit here protecting your pride while Breslin wonders why her father values his ego more than seeing her. Your choice. The world tilted. This stranger, this woman in designer clothing, standing in an empty parking lot near midnight, knew his name, knew Breslin's name, knew Casey's address. Garrett's hand moved to the hood release on instinct, some primal survival mechanism responding to the command in her voice before conscious thought could interfere. The hood popped with a metallic chunk. She worked efficiently, connecting cables from her BMW to his dying battery without small talk or explanation. Moved like someone who'd performed this exact sequence countless times, though everything about her suggested she'd never touched jumper cables before tonight. Try it. Garrett turned the key. The engine caught, sputtered, roared to reluctant life. Relief flooded through him, immediately chased by suspicion sharp enough to taste. The woman disconnected the cables with practiced movements, wound them precisely, and only then approached his window. Close up, Garrett placed her age around mid-40s, dark brown hair pulled back severely, gray eyes that studied him with the intensity of a scientist examining an unexpected variable. Thank you. I appreciate. Garrett Sullivan, 38 years old, maintenance technician, level 3, 6 years with Hayes Industrial, average monthly overtime, 72 hours, compensated for approximately 43. Widower, 1 daughter, 8 years old. She delivered facts like reading a grocery list. 4 performance reviews during your tenure, all rating you meets expectations with 0 advancement recommendations. Blood drained from Garrett's face. The engine idled. They were alone in this parking lot. This woman possessed information no random stranger should have. Every instinct screamed danger. Who are you? She extended her hand through the window. Victoria Hayes. I own this company. The CEO, holy God. The CEO of Hayes Industrial Solutions had been waiting in a parking lot at midnight to jumpstart his truck. Garrett had glimpsed her twice in 6 years, once as a distant figure during a company-wide meeting, once passing through the manufacturing floor surrounded by executives. She was legend in break-room conversations. The woman who'd built a multi-million-dollar industrial electronics empire from nothing, who worked 100-hour weeks and never smiled, who'd reportedly made a Fortune 500 competitor's CFO weep during contract negotiations. Panic clawed up Garrett's throat. "Ms. Hayes, I apologize about blocking the lot. I don't care about parking." She cut through his apology with the casual brutality of boardroom efficiency. "I care about why an exceptional technician remains stuck at level 3 after 6 years of exemplary work. My performance reviews say your performance reviews are fabricated garbage." Something flickered behind her eyes. Anger, possibly, or something colder. "I've examined your actual work orders, Mr. Sullivan. You solved 98.7% of technical issues on first attempt. Highest success rate in the entire maintenance department. Your equipment uptime metrics are flawless. 3 weeks ago, you prevented catastrophic hydraulic press failure that would have cost this company $2 million and weeks of production delays. Yet you've never been promoted, never properly compensated, never received accurate evaluations. I want to know why." This wasn't real. CEOs didn't materialize in parking lots to discuss maintenance technicians' career trajectories at midnight. "I don't know." Victoria Hayes stepped closer to the truck, and in the dome light, Garrett saw her expression carved from ice. "I know. That's why I've been waiting for you to finish your shift." She produced a folder from her car. He hadn't noticed her retrieve it, and held it toward the window. "Read this, then decide whether you want the full story. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Your apartment at 412 Maple Court, Unit 2B. She knew his address. Of course she did. "You can't just, I'll be there at 7. Victoria Hayes stepped back from the truck. "This isn't termination, Mr. Sullivan. This is an opportunity for justice. What you do with it is your decision." She walked to her BMW, heels clicking on pavement, and Garrett sat frozen with the folder in his hands and reality fracturing around him. The BM purred to life. Naturally, her battery worked perfectly, and she drove away, leaving him alone with his resurrected truck and the growing certainty that his life had just pivoted in directions he couldn't begin to comprehend. The folder felt heavier than paper should. Garrett set it on the passenger seat and pulled out of the lot, hands trembling slightly on the wheel. The 15-minute drive to Casey's house stretched into eternity while his mind spun through possibilities, none of them making sense. Casey opened her door in a bathrobe, expression hovering between relief and exasperation. "She's in the guest room. I told her you'd get her in the morning, but I'm taking her home tonight." Garrett moved past his sister toward the room where Breslin slept. His daughter lay curled on her side, brown hair fanned across the pillow, arms wrapped around the teddy bear Amanda had given her for her 5th birthday. The bear was missing an eye, had been sewn back together twice, but Breslin refused sleep without it. She looked peaceful now, chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of childhood trust that her father could fix anything. Garrett gathered her carefully. She barely stirred, murmuring something that might have been "Daddy" before nestling against his chest. The drive home was silent. Breslin woke briefly when he carried her inside, eyes opening just enough to register her own bedroom. "You came back." "Always, baby bear." "Promise?" Garrett tucked blankets around her, smoothing her hair the way Amanda used to. "Promise." She slept again before he left the room. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen opening into a living room barely large enough for a couch and television. Rent was $1,650 monthly, highway robbery for this square footage. But the school district mattered more than space. Furniture was mismatched secondhand pieces and items Casey had donated when Amanda died. Bills covered the kitchen counter in organized piles Garrett updated every Sunday. Utilities, insurance, Breslin's therapy sessions, car payment, credit cards still carrying medical debt from Amanda's treatment. His checking account currently held $243. Payday was 5 days away. Garrett made coffee, the cheap kind that tasted like burnt regret but contained enough caffeine to maintain consciousness, and opened Victoria Hayes' folder. Inside were payroll records, performance evaluations, email chains, bank statements, pages of documentation, each marked with color-coded tabs and handwritten notes in precise script. Garrett spread them across the table, exhaustion forgotten. His direct supervisor, Dalton Pierce, appeared on nearly every page. Dalton, who'd been with Hayes Industrial 15 years. Dalton, who'd expressed such sympathy when Amanda died, who'd told Garrett to take all the time needed, who'd patted his shoulder and called him buddy, and made Garrett feel like maybe decent people still existed. Dalton had created 3 phantom employees. The documentation was meticulous. Email chains where Dalton requested new hires. Correspondence with HR approving positions. Payroll records showing salaries paid to people named Marcus Brennan, Jennifer Kohler, and David Sutton, none of whom existed. The money flowed into bank accounts Dalton controlled. $71,000 annually per fake employee. 3 phantom workers meant $213,000 yearly. The fraud had been running 28 months. Garrett's hands shook doing the math. Nearly $600,000. $500,000 stolen while he worked himself into the ground, while he missed Breslin's school plays and parent-teacher conferences, while he chose between groceries and electric bills. The performance reviews were worse. Victoria Hayes had included both official versions filed with HR and Garrett's actual performance data pulled from the work order system. The contrast made bile rise in his throat. According to official reviews, Garrett was adequate, meets basic expectations, shows up on time, completes assigned tasks. According to the work order system, he maintained a 98.7% first attempt fix rate, had 0 safety violations, and had personally prevented 4 major equipment failures in the past year. Every positive metric in the real data had been either omitted or falsified in official reviews. Someone had systematically destroyed his career progression while stealing his overtime pay and forcing him to cover the workload of 3 non-existent employees. Dalton Pierce, the man who'd offered sympathy at Amanda's funeral. Garrett remembered that day with crystalline clarity. The cemetery with its rows of headstones marching toward the horizon, Breslin in her black dress gripping Garrett's hand until his fingers went numb, Casey crying quietly beside them. The priest offering words about eternal rest that meant nothing because Amanda was gone and no prayer would resurrect her. Dalton had approached after the ceremony, pressed Garrett's shoulder, looked him in the eye and said, "Take all the time you need, buddy. Family comes first." The memory curdled into something toxic. He read through remaining documentation. Victoria's handwritten notes appeared in margins, connecting dots, highlighting patterns. She'd included a summary page near the back, and her analysis was devastating. Dalton's scheme required cooperation from someone in payroll processing and someone in HR. The phantom employees had been approved too quickly, their documentation too clean. This wasn't solo operation. The last page was a printout of the Hayes Industrial Organizational Chart. Victoria had marked 3 names in red ink: Dalton Pierce, Warren Thatcher, the Chief Financial Officer, and Jennifer Kohler, Director of Human Resources. Conspiracy from the top down. Garrett closed the folder and stared at the kitchen wall. Dawn approached, pale light beginning to seep around window blinds. He thought about Amanda in that hospital bed, her hand in his, her voice barely audible as morphine pulled her under. "Promise me Breslin will have a good life. Promise me you'll give her everything." He'd promised. God help him, he'd promised, and he'd been failing ever since. The apartment was silent except for the refrigerator's hum and distant early morning traffic. Garrett stood, walked to Breslin's room, eased the door open. She slept with one arm thrown over her head, teddy bear clutched against her chest, face peaceful in ways that made his heart physically ache. 8 years old, and she'd already learned her father was always tired, always working, always choosing his job over time with her. Not because he wanted to, because Dalton Pierce and Warren Thatcher and Jennifer Kohler had built a system designed to exploit people like Garrett, people who'd work themselves to death rather than lose employment, people who had daughters depending on them, people who believed working harder would eventually earn reward for loyalty. Garrett closed Breslin's door and returned to the kitchen table. He picked up his phone, found Victoria Hayes' number in recent calls, typed a message. "I'll be here at 7. The response came 30 seconds later, which meant Victoria Hayes was awake at 5 a.m. on a Saturday. This didn't surprise him. "Good. Come alone. This conversation stays between us until we decide otherwise." Garrett set the phone down and attempted sleep on the couch for the remaining hour, but his mind wouldn't stop turning over implications. Eventually, he surrendered and made more coffee, showered, changed into clean clothes, and waited for 7 a.m. to arrive with the inevitability of judgment. The doorbell rang at 7:03 a.m. Garrett checked the peephole, habit developed from apartment living where you never quite knew who might come knocking, and saw Victoria Hayes standing in the hallway. She'd traded her business suit for jeans and a gray sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back, looking more like someone's professional aunt than a CEO worth 8 figures. He opened the door. She held 2 Starbucks cups, steam rising from plastic lids. Black coffee, no sugar. Calculated guess based on your demographic profile. You profiled my coffee preferences. I profile everything. She stepped inside without waiting for invitation, eyes scanning the apartment with analytical intensity Garrett had seen in the parking lot. He watched her absorb the second-hand furniture, bills on the counter, children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, visible signs of a man treading water in a rising tide. Victoria set coffee cups on the kitchen table and gestured to chairs. Sit. We need to discuss what happens next. Garrett sat. She remained standing for a moment, fingers drumming once against the table surface, the only nervous gesture he'd witnessed from her, before taking the opposite chair. You read the folder. Yeah. Questions? About 1,000. Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Her nails were short, practical, unpolished. Ask. Why are you here? Garrett leaned forward, his own coffee forgotten. CEOs don't make house calls to level 3 maintenance techs. They don't jumpstart dead batteries in parking lots. They don't personally investigate payroll fraud. So why are you really here? Something shifted in Victoria's expression, a crack in ice revealing something raw underneath. Because 3 weeks ago, I was reviewing Q3 financial reports and noticed discrepancies in overtime line items. Department supervisors were submitting overtime claims that didn't match processed payroll disbursements. The gap was significant, $60,000 per quarter across multiple departments. I assumed accounting error. She paused, sipped coffee. It wasn't an error. I started digging, pulled payroll records going back 3 years, found phantom employees, traced money to offshore accounts controlled by people in my own company, people I trusted. Her voice hardened. People who've been systematically stealing from Hayes Industrial and from employees like you, while I focused on quarterly earnings and market share expansion. Garrett heard what she wasn't saying. You feel responsible. I am responsible. The words came out edged with something that might have been anger or might have been grief. I built this company 20 years ago in a garage with 3 employees and a prototype circuit board. Built it from nothing into what it is today. And somewhere in that process, I stopped seeing the people who actually make this company work. Stopped walking the factory floor. Stopped learning names. Became the kind of executive who reviews spreadsheets instead of looking people in the eye. She set her coffee down with enough force to slosh liquid over the rim. So yes, Mr. Sullivan, I'm here because I'm responsible. Because you worked yourself nearly to death for a company I created, and you were rewarded by having your labor stolen and your career sabotaged. That's on me, and I don't hide from my mistakes. Garrett studied her face. Victoria Hayes had features that could shift from attractive to intimidating in a heartbeat, and right now she looked like she was deciding whether to build a wall or burn a bridge. Her jaw was set, eyes fierce, and for the first time since entering his apartment, she looked uncertain. What do you need from me? Evidence? From the inside. Dalton talks to you daily. He trusts you, or at least doesn't see you as a threat. I need you to get him on a record admitting he knows about the payroll fraud. A recording. Something that will hold up when I present this to the board and eventually authorities. He'll never admit to, he will if you approach it correctly. Victoria pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, slid it across the table. I've analyzed Dalton's behavioral patterns. He's arrogant, comfortable in his position, views subordinates as less intelligent than himself. If you complain about your paycheck, ask questions about budget cuts, express frustration about workload, he'll either let something slip or he'll make a mistake trying to manipulate you into silence. Garrett looked at the phone. She'd compiled a psychological profile of Dalton Pierce, complete with conversation strategies and predicted responses. The level of detail was unnerving. And if I get caught, Victoria took her phone back, then you lose your car, and I probably lose control of my company. Warren Thatcher has 8% equity and a board seat. Jennifer Kohler's father is on the board. Fire them without ironclad proof and they'll sue Hayes Industrial into bankruptcy. 500 people lose jobs, including you. Great odds. They're the only odds I have. Victoria met his eyes and Garrett saw desperation there, carefully controlled but present. I won't lie to you, Mr. Sullivan, this is dangerous. Dalton has connections. Warren has more. They've been running this operation over 2 years without getting caught, which means they're smart and careful. If they suspect you're working with me, they will destroy you. And what do I get in return? Operations supervisor position, $98,000 annual salary, standard 45-hour work weeks, full benefits package including premium health coverage for yourself and your daughter, and back pay for the overtime they stole, approximately $47,000. Garrett's breath caught. $47,000. That was enough to pay off Amanda's remaining medical debt, build an actual emergency fund, maybe even start a college account for Breslin. That was breathing room. That was the ability to choose between groceries and electric bills instead of calculating which one could be delayed another week. When would this happen? After we have sufficient evidence to present to the board and pursue criminal charges. 6 to 8 weeks, assuming everything goes according to plan. And if it doesn't, Victoria's expression hardened. Then I get removed as CEO, Warren takes control, and you probably get fired for participating in an investigation that failed. But doing nothing means Dalton keeps stealing, Warren keeps covering for him, and you keep working 20-hour days while your daughter learns that her father values his pride more than being present in her life. The words hit like a gut punch. Garrett started to respond, started to defend himself, to explain that it wasn't pride, it was survival. But the bedroom door opened before he could form words. Breslin emerged in her pajamas, pale pink with cartoon bears, a gift from Casey 2 birthdays ago, her hair a tangled mess, teddy bear dragging on the floor behind her. She rubbed her eyes with one small fist, blinking in morning light filtering through the kitchen window. Daddy? Every hard edge in Garrett's body softened instantly. Hey, baby bear, you're up early. I heard talking. Breslin noticed Victoria sitting at the table and stopped, eyes going wide. Who's that? Victoria froze. Garrett watched something like panic flash across her face before she controlled it. And in that moment, he understood that Victoria Hayes, CEO, company founder, woman who'd built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing, had absolutely no idea how to interact with an 8-year-old child. This is Victoria. She works with Daddy. Breslin tilted her head, studying Victoria with unfiltered curiosity only children possessed. Daddy doesn't have many friends. Victoria's mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. Might have been a grimace. I'm noticing that pattern. Brez, go brush your teeth. I'll make breakfast. Can Victoria stay? Breslin looked at Victoria with hopeful eyes. We're having pancakes. She's probably busy with, I could stay. The words came out before Victoria seemed to fully process them, and Garrett saw surprise flash across her face. If that's acceptable. Breslin beamed and disappeared into the bathroom. Garrett heard water running, the sound of a toothbrush wielded with more enthusiasm than accuracy, and then his daughter was back, climbing onto a chair at the kitchen table, teddy bear positioned carefully beside her, and Garrett moved to the kitchen, pulling ingredients from cabinets. Pancake mix, eggs, milk 2 days from its expiration date. He'd made this breakfast every Saturday since Amanda died, maintaining the tradition she'd started when Breslin was 3. The pancakes always came out slightly burnt because Garrett inevitably got distracted and left them on the griddle too long, but Breslin never complained. Mommy used to make pancakes every Saturday. Breslin's voice carried from the table, directed at Victoria. Now Daddy makes them, but... She dropped her voice to a stage whisper that carried perfectly through the small apartment. They're always burnt. I can hear you, Garrett called from the stove. I know, I'm being honest. Breslin turned her attention back to Victoria. Can you cook? No, not really. Really? Even adults can't cook sometimes? Especially adults sometimes. What do you eat then? Victoria shifted in her chair, looking deeply uncomfortable with this interrogation. Takeout, a lot of takeout. Breslin's face scrunched up in concern. That's sad. You should eat real food. Daddy says takeout isn't healthy if you have it too much. Garrett flipped pancakes, listening to his daughter inadvertently deliver life advice to a woman worth more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. Victoria looked completely disarmed, her corporate armor useless against an 8-year-old's blunt honesty. You're probably right. Do you have kids? Breslin, Garrett started, but Victoria held up a hand. No, I don't have children. How come? I work a lot. I didn't make time for family. Breslin considered this with the seriousness of someone 3 times her age. That's sad, too. Work isn't as important as people. The apartment went quiet except for the sizzle of pancakes on the griddle. Garrett watched Victoria's face cycle through several expressions. Surprise, discomfort, and finally something that looked like recognition. An 8-year-old had just summarized the central failure of Victoria Hayes's entire adult life in a single sentence, and she knew it. Garrett served breakfast. The pancakes were, as predicted, slightly burnt. They ate in silence that was surprisingly comfortable, Breslin chattering between bites about school and her friend Emma and the science project they were planning about butterflies. Victoria listened with what appeared to be genuine attention, asking questions that showed she was actually processing what Breslin said rather than just waiting for the child to stop talking. After breakfast, Breslin disappeared into her room and returned with a stack of drawings. She spread them across the table with the pride of an artist unveiling a gallery exhibition. This is my family. She pointed to a crayon drawing showing 3 figures, a tall man, a small girl, and a woman with wings hovering above them. Daddy, me, and Mommy, she watches from heaven. Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she picked up the drawing. For the first time since Garrett had met her, her expression was completely open. Grief and longing and something else he couldn't quite identify. It's beautiful, Breslin. You can have it. Breslin pushed the drawing toward Victoria. So you remember that people are important. I want you to have it. Breslin's voice held the absolute certainty of childhood. You look sad. This will help. Victoria accepted the drawing like it was made of spun glass, fingers careful on the edges. Her eyes were bright, not crying but close. Thank you. I'll keep it somewhere safe. Breslin nodded, satisfied, and gathered her other drawings. I'm going to watch cartoons now. Daddy, can Victoria stay longer? She probably has work to... I can stay a little longer. Victoria's voice was quiet, and when Garrett looked at her, he saw that carefully maintained ice had cracked wide open, revealing something human and hurting underneath. Breslin disappeared into the living room. The television clicked on, cartoon voices filling the apartment. Garrett and Victoria sat at the kitchen table with coffee cups and the drawing Breslin had given away, and the silence stretched between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. She's remarkable. She's everything. Garrett's voice came out rough. She's why I'm sitting here considering your offer instead of telling you to leave. Because I promised Amanda that Breslin would have a good life, and right now I'm barely keeping our heads above water. Victoria traced the edge of the drawing with one finger. I don't have anyone. No children, no partner, no family I speak to. I built Hayes Industrial thinking it would fill that emptiness, but... She looked up at Garrett. Your daughter just gave me more genuine connection in 30 minutes than I've experienced in the past 5 years. You could have that, if you let people in. I don't know how. The admission seemed to cost her something. I spent 2 decades building walls and optimizing systems and convincing myself that emotional connections were inefficient uses of time. And now I'm 45 years old, sitting in a maintenance technician's kitchen, accepting life advice from an 8-year-old, because I don't have anyone else who'd even notice if I disappeared tomorrow. Garrett saw past the CEO armor to the lonely woman underneath, and something in his chest shifted. Victoria Hayes wasn't here just because she felt responsible for the fraud. She was here because she'd looked at the man and seen Garrett's life, a widower working himself to death to provide for his daughter, and recognized that she'd built a system that destroyed exactly the kind of person Amanda had been. Exactly the kind of family Garrett was fighting to preserve. Okay, Victoria's eyes sharpened. Okay, I'll do it. Help you gather evidence. But I have conditions. Name them. First, if this goes bad, Breslin comes first. I'll cooperate. I'll wear whatever wire you need me to wear, but my daughter doesn't get involved. Ever. Agreed, I'll ensure she's protected. Second, you have to be honest with me. No corporate doublespeak, no carefully worded non-answers. I want the truth about what we're doing and what the risks are. Victoria hesitated, then nodded. Fair. And I need the same from you. If you start feeling compromised, if Dalton gets suspicious, if anything feels wrong, you tell me immediately. Deal. Garrett extended his hand across the table. Victoria shook it. Her grip was firm, her palm warm, and Garrett felt the weight of commitment settle over both of them like a shared burden. One more thing. Victoria pulled her phone out, typed something, then showed him the screen. This is my personal cell, not my office line, not my assistant's number, mine. If you need anything, evidence, backup, someone to talk to at 3 in the morning when everything feels impossible, you call this number. Why are you doing this? Garrett asked. Really? Because there are easier ways to handle corporate fraud than personally recruiting a maintenance tech to wear a wire. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd heard it yet. Because I saw your file, saw what they'd done to you, saw that you have a daughter who barely sees her father because he's too busy being exploited by systems I created. And I thought about calling you or sending an email or having HR schedule a meeting. But all of those felt like more corporate efficiency, more distance, more of the same poison that created this mess. She looked toward the living room where Breslin's cartoons played. I needed you to see that I know, that I'm not hiding behind my title or my lawyers or my quarterly earnings reports, that I'm willing to sit in your kitchen and face what my company has done to you, because you deserve that. Garrett felt something shift in how he saw her. Not a CEO, not a distant executive, but a woman who'd built so many walls around herself that she'd forgotten how to be human, and who was trying, desperately and awkwardly, to find her way back. They talked for another hour. Logistics, timeline, risks. Victoria would provide the wire recording equipment through a private investigator she trusted. Garrett would start Monday, normal interactions with Dalton, subtle questions about payroll and overtime. Build evidence slowly, methodically, until they had enough to present to the board and law enforcement. This will take weeks, Victoria warned, maybe longer, and every day you're gathering evidence is a day you're at risk. I understand. Do you? Victoria's expression was serious. Because once we start this, there's no going back. Dalton will be suspicious if you suddenly stop asking questions. Warren will be watching for any sign that someone's investigating. You'll be living a double life, loyal employee on the surface, informant underneath. That pressure breaks most people. Then I guess we'll find out if I break. Victoria stood to leave, and Garrett walked her to the door. She paused on the threshold, looking back at the small apartment, at the bills on the counter, at the cartoon sounds from the living room, at the life Garrett had built from grief and determination. Thank you for breakfast. And for this. She held up the drawing Breslin had given her. Tell your daughter she's right. People are more important than work. I'm starting to remember that. Then she was gone, and Garrett stood in his doorway, watching her walk down the hallway to the elevator, carrying a child's crayon drawing like it was the most valuable thing she owned. He closed the door and leaned against it, mind racing through implications and possibilities and dangers. In the living room, Breslin laughed at something on television, the sound pure and innocent and completely unaware that her father had just agreed to risk everything on a conspiracy investigation led by a CEO who'd only just remembered how to be human. The rest of Saturday passed quietly. Garrett took Breslin to the park, pushed her on swings, watched her play with other children, and tried not to think about Monday. Tried not to calculate the odds of success versus catastrophic failure. Tried not to imagine what would happen if Dalton discovered the wire or Warren Thatcher decided Garrett was a threat that needed eliminating. Sunday brought a text from Victoria. Equipment will be delivered to your apartment Monday at 6 a.m. Man named Richard Cole, private investigator, former FBI. He'll fit you with the wire and explain operation. Don't be alarmed when he arrives. Garrett responded, understood. Another message. And Garrett, thank you for trusting me. We'll get through this. And when it's over, things will be different. I promise. Monday morning arrived with the weight of consequence. Richard Cole appeared at 5:58 a.m., a man in his early 60s with a face designed to disappear in crowds and eyes that cataloged everything. He worked efficiently, taping a device no bigger than a quarter to Garrett's chest just below his collarbone, running the wire down his sternum to a transmitter that clipped to his belt. Voice activated, 8-hour battery. Don't touch it. Don't acknowledge it exists. If Dalton gets physical, handshake, pat on the back, the placement should keep it undetectable. Should? Richard met his eyes. Nothing's guaranteed, but I've been doing this 23 years, only been caught twice, and both times I walked away. Not reassuring. It's realistic. Richard handed Garrett his shirt. Victoria's listening remotely. Anything goes wrong, she'll know within seconds. But understand, if Dalton realizes you're wired, there's nothing we can do fast enough to prevent immediate consequences. Garrett pulled his shirt on, hands steadier than expected. Somewhere between Saturday's decision and Monday's execution, fear had crystallized into determination. The drive to Hayes Industrial took 12 minutes. Garrett parked in his usual spot, grabbed his lunchbox and thermos, and walked through the employee entrance like he had 1,000 times before. The security guard, Marcus, a former Marine who worked nights, nodded without looking up from his crossword puzzle. The maintenance department occupied the northwest corner of the manufacturing floor. Dalton Pierce's office sat at the far end, separated by glass walls that let him surveil his team while maintaining executive distance. Garrett clocked in at 7:47 a.m. 3 other technicians were already present: Eddie Morales, Jake Brennan, Connor Watts. The morning passed in routine work orders: conveyor motor malfunction, electrical panel diagnostics, temperature sensor calibration. Every time Dalton glanced through his glass walls, Garrett's pulse kicked up. Every time someone approached, he tensed. At 11:58 a.m., Garrett knocked on Dalton's door. "Come in." Dalton gestured to a chair. "Close the door." The office was small, dominated by a desk covered in paperwork and a filing cabinet that looked unorganized since the Clinton administration. A window overlooked the manufacturing floor, giving Dalton a god's eye view of his domain. "How are you holding up? I know the past few months have been rough." "Managing. You've been putting in serious hours. 70, 80 some weeks. That's a lot for anyone, especially someone raising a kid alone." Dalton's concern sounded genuine, which made it more disturbing. "I wanted you to know I see that. I appreciate it." "Appreciate it enough to pay me for all those hours?" The question came out harder than Garrett intended. He watched Dalton's expression shift. Surprise, then calculation, then something that might have been worry. "You're getting paid for your overtime." "Not all of it. I've been tracking my hours. Last month I worked 68 hours over my standard 40. My paycheck reflected 51. Dalton's jaw tightened. "Payroll screws up sometimes. Automated system. Glitches happen. I can look into it." "This isn't the first time. It's been happening for months." "Why didn't you mention it sooner?" "Because I was too exhausted to notice," Garrett thought. "Because I trusted you. Because I didn't realize you were stealing from me while I worked myself nearly to death." "I'm mentioning it now." Dalton drummed his fingers on the desk. The wire picked up every sound: the chair creak, the finger taps, the slight hitch in Dalton's breathing. "Look, between you and me, payroll's been a nightmare lately. Corporate did system upgrades, and hours are getting lost in transfer. It's affecting multiple people. I've been fighting with HR about it for weeks." "So it's a known problem." "Known and being addressed. But these things take time, bureaucracy. You know how it is." Dalton leaned forward, voice dropping to something conspiratorial. "Here's what I'll do. I'll personally audit your hours for the past 6 months. Make sure you get every cent you're owed. Might take a few weeks to process, but I'll make it happen." "Sound good?" It sounded like exactly what someone would say if they were buying time. Garrett nodded slowly. "I'd appreciate that." "Good man. And Sullivan, do me a favor. Don't mention the payroll issues to the other techs. I don't want to start a panic before we've got it sorted out. Last thing we need is everyone demanding audits and gumming up the works. Better to fix it quietly. Get everyone made whole without drama. There it was, the request for silence, the implication that speaking up would cause problems. Garrett felt anger flash hot in his chest, but he kept his voice level. Whatever you think is best. I knew I could count on you. Dalton stood, signaling the conversation was over. Hang in there, Sullivan. Things are going to get better. You have my word. Garrett left the office with Dalton's worthless word ringing in his ears and the wire still recording against his chest. He worked through the rest of his shift on autopilot, mind replaying every inflection, every moment where Dalton had lied with practiced ease. At 4:37 p.m., his phone buzzed with an address, a coffee shop 15 miles from Hayes Industrial. Garrett arrived at 5:20 to find Victoria sitting in a corner booth, laptop open, exhaustion shadowing her eyes. I heard everything. She gestured to the seat across from her. Richard's already pulled the audio and started transcription. Is it enough? For what? Proving Dalton's a liar? Yes. Proving he's criminally embezzling funds? Not yet. Victoria closed her laptop. He admitted to a payroll problem but framed it as system error. Any competent officer will argue he was trying to help you, not cover up fraud. Garrett's shoulders sagged. So I risked my job for nothing. You established baseline behavior. Now we know how he responds under pressure. Deflection, promises, requests for silence. Tomorrow you push harder. He's suspicious. He's cautious. There's a difference in debate. Victoria's gray eyes studied him. You did well today. Most people can't maintain composure during their first wire operation. What happens now? Now we continue, build evidence slowly, and Garrett, she paused. There's something else. Breslin's school called me today. Garrett's heart stopped. What? Why would they call you? Apparently Breslin listed me as an emergency contact. She's doing a presentation Friday on butterfly metamorphosis. Asked if I'd attend. Victoria's expression was uncertain. I said yes, but I wanted to check with you first. If that's overstepping, no, it's fine. She'd be thrilled if you came. Relief flashed across Victoria's face. Good, because I'd hate to disappoint her. They parted ways and Garrett drove home with his mind spinning. Somewhere in the past 72 hours, Victoria Hayes had gone from distant CEO to someone his daughter felt comfortable listing as emergency contact. Someone who'd shown up and cared enough that Breslin wanted her at a school presentation. The week crawled forward. Tuesday through Thursday brought more wire recordings, more careful questions to Dalton, more evidence that built a pattern but didn't quite reach criminal threshold. Jake Brennan and Connor Watts approached Garrett Wednesday, wanting to know about their own missing overtime. Give me until next week, Garrett told them. I'm working on something. Friday arrived. Garrett took a half day and drove to Lincoln Elementary at 1:45 p.m. Victoria's BMW was already in the parking lot. She emerged wearing slacks and a blouse, looking nervous in ways he'd never seen. I've never done this. School events. What's the protocol? You sit, you watch, you clap. Breslin does the rest. The presentation took place in the third grade classroom. Parents filled small chairs, knees awkwardly high. Breslin went seventh, approaching the front with confidence that made Garrett's chest ache. Metamorphosis is when something changes from one form to another. Caterpillars eat and grow until they're ready to transform. Then they build a chrysalis, which is like a house where they can become something new. She pointed to her poster board showing the butterfly life cycle. Inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar basically melts. It becomes soup. All its parts break down and reform into butterfly parts. Scientists call this histolysis and histogenesis, which are big words for breaking down and building back up. Breslin looked directly at Victoria when she continued. It takes about 2 weeks inside the chrysalis. That probably feels really long if you're caterpillar soup, but you can't rush it. If you break open the chrysalis too early to help the butterfly, you actually hurt it. It needs the struggle of breaking free to make its wings strong enough to fly. The metaphor wasn't subtle. Transformation required breaking down before building back up. Help offered too early could prevent necessary strength. An 8-year-old science project, accidentally containing profound wisdom. When the butterfly finally emerges, it's not immediately beautiful. Its wings are crumpled and wet. It has to hang upside down and pump fluid through wing veins for several hours before it can fly. But once it does, Breslin's voice filled with wonder, once it does, it's completely different from what it was. It can fly anywhere. It's transformed. After presentations, students mingled with parents. Breslin bounded over, beaming. Did you like it? Did I do okay? You were perfect. Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. Absolutely perfect. They left the school together, and something had shifted. Victoria no longer looked like someone visiting Garrett's life. She looked like someone becoming part of it, tentatively and scared but committed to trying. The weekend brought more evidence gathering, more wire recordings, more pieces of a puzzle slowly forming picture of systematic corruption. By the following Friday, November 1st, they had enough. Richard Cole confirmed it. The recordings combined with Victoria's financial documentation would be sufficient to trigger board investigation and criminal charges. Monday, Victoria said, I present everything to the board Monday morning. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be. Then this is it. The moment where everything changes or everything falls apart. No middle ground. Garrett looked at her, sitting across from him in the coffee shop where they'd spent so many evenings planning, and he understood that whatever happened Monday, they'd crossed a threshold. They were no longer just CEO and employee, no longer just investigation partners. They were something else. Something neither was quite ready to name but both recognized as real. We'll make it work, Garrett said. Whatever happens Monday, we'll figure it out. Victoria nodded, and for the first time since he'd met her in that parking lot 3 weeks ago, she smiled without guardedness or calculation. Just genuine hope that maybe, possibly, things were about to get better. Monday morning arrived with the weight of reckoning. Garrett drove to Hayes Industrial and with 3 weeks of wire recordings on a USB drive in his pocket and the certainty that today would either vindicate everything or destroy it completely. Victoria had scheduled an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m., and by 9:30 the entire company would know that their CFO and operations supervisor were thieves. He parked and sat in his truck for 5 minutes, watching employees stream through the entrance. Eddie Morales, Jake Brennan, Connor Watts. People whose overtime had been stolen, whose careers had been sabotaged, whose trust had been weaponized against them. Today was for them as much as for Breslin or himself. At 8:47, his phone buzzed. Victoria, it's time. Whatever happens in there, thank you for making this possible. Garrett texted back, good luck. He didn't attend the board meeting. Maintenance techs weren't invited to executive sessions. But the entire manufacturing floor felt the tension. People clustered in break rooms, checking phones, waiting for news. At 10:23 a.m., the announcement came via company-wide email. Effective immediately, CFO Warren Thatcher and Operations Supervisor Dalton Pierce have been suspended pending investigation into financial irregularities. An independent audit has been initiated. Victoria Hayes remains CEO. Further updates will follow. The floor erupted. Garrett's phone exploded with texts from coworkers demanding explanations. Jake Brennan cornered him at lunch. You knew, that's why you told us to wait. You were helping her build the case. Yeah. Jesus, Sullivan. You could have been fired, could have been arrested yourself if they'd caught you. I know. Jake studied his face for a long moment, then extended his hand. Thank you. Seriously. Whatever happens next, you did something most people wouldn't have the guts to do. The week that followed was chaos. Auditors descended on Hayes Industrial like locusts, examining every financial record from the past 5 years. Warren Thatcher hired a team of lawyers and issued statements claiming the investigation was retaliation for challenging Victoria's leadership. Dalton Pierce went silent, which Victoria's attorney Thomas Reed said was smart. Anything Dalton said could be used against him. Garrett was promoted to operations supervisor on Wednesday, with the salary increase Victoria had promised. The back pay hit his account Thursday, $47,312. He stared at the number for 10 minutes, unable to process that the struggling was over, that he could afford Breslin's dental work and new winter coat and the field trip to the Science Museum without calculating which bill to delay. Thursday evening, Victoria called. Can I take you and Breslin to dinner Saturday? Celebrate the promotion. And she hesitated. I'd like to spend time with you both, outside of investigation context, if that's acceptable. More than acceptable. Saturday brought the first real date they'd had. If you could call dinner with an 8-year-old a date. Victoria chose a family restaurant, casual and loud, the kind of place where children's laughter echoed off walls and no one judged burnt offerings or awkward conversation. Breslin ordered chicken fingers and spent the meal explaining her upcoming project on monarch migration patterns. Did you know butterflies can fly 3,000 miles? Their brains are tiny, but they remember where to go. It's called instinct. Instinct is powerful, Victoria agreed. Sometimes we know things without understanding how we know them. Like how I knew you were nice even though you looked scary at first. Victoria laughed, real laughter, not the polished corporate version. Yes, exactly like that. After dinner, they walked through a park near the restaurant. Breslin ran ahead, chasing autumn leaves, while Garrett and Victoria followed at a distance that felt deliberately maintained. Not quite together, not quite apart. This is strange, Victoria said quietly. Being here, not working, just existing with people I care about. Strange good or strange bad? Strange terrifying. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to realize I'm terrible at this and decide it's not worth the effort. Garrett stopped walking. Victoria, look at me. She turned, and in the golden light of late afternoon, he saw a vulnerability she'd been trying to hide. You're doing fine. Better than fine. Breslin adores you. And he paused, choosing words carefully. I'm not going anywhere. This isn't some temporary thing where I'm using you for the promotion or waiting until the investigation concludes. I'm here because I want to be. Even though I'm difficult and emotionally constipated and have no idea how to be someone's partner, especially because of that, because you're trying, because you showed up at my apartment that first morning and you've kept showing up every day since. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you, either of you. That's not your call to make. We've already decided you're worth keeping. They stood in the park while Breslin played and other families moved around them, and something fragile but real solidified between them. When they finally walked back to the parking lot, Victoria's hand found Garrett's, and they held on like people testing whether connection could survive outside investigation rooms and wire recordings. The following Friday brought catastrophe. Garrett was on the manufacturing floor when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Sullivan, this is Detective Sarah Rodriguez with Pennsylvania State Police. We need you to come to Hayes Industrial immediately. There's been an incident involving Ms. Victoria Hayes. His vision tunneled. What kind of incident? I'd prefer to discuss in person. How soon can you get here? 20 minutes of panic driving, and Garrett arrived to find police cars, news vans, employees crowding outside the main entrance. He pushed through to the lobby where Detective Rodriguez waited, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a notepad. Mr. Sullivan, thank you for coming. I need to ask about your relationship with Victoria Hayes. What happened? Where is she? She's been taken into custody. This morning during a board meeting, evidence was presented suggesting Ms. Hayes has been embezzling company funds. We executed a warrant to examine her accounts and found transfers totaling $2.3 million to offshore accounts over the past 3 years. The world tilted. That's impossible. Victoria's been investigating. Investigating what, Mr. Sullivan? Garrett's mouth snapped shut. If he revealed the investigation now without preparation, he'd expose Victoria's case before it was ready. But staying silent meant letting false charges stand. I need to speak with her attorney, Thomas Reed. Detective Rodriguez's expression shifted to suspicious. Why would you need to contact her lawyer if you were just a maintenance tech at her company? Because she listed me as an emergency contact, and I'm not saying anything else without legal counsel present. The detective's eyes narrowed. Are you involved in this fraud, Mr. Sullivan? I'm involved in wanting to know what's happening before I say something that could be twisted. Now either arrest me or let me make a phone call. Garrett called Thomas Reed, explained the situation in terse sentences. Reed's response was immediate. Don't say anything to anyone. I'm contacting the prosecutor's office now. Meet me at my office in 1 hour. The next 6 hours were a blur of statements and evidence, and Garrett walking Detective Rodriguez through every wire recording, every document Victoria had compiled, every piece of proof that Warren Thatcher and Dalton Pierce were running the fraud operation, not Victoria. Thomas Reed produced his own evidence, duplicates of everything Victoria had gathered, plus additional materials showing the offshore accounts had been opened using credentials stolen from Victoria's office. By 8 p.m., the case against Victoria was collapsing. By 9 p.m., new warrants were issued for Warren Thatcher's arrest. By 10 p.m., Victoria was released on her own recognizance, pending full investigation. Garrett waited in the station lobby, exhausted and wired from adrenaline. When Victoria emerged from booking, she looked like she'd aged 10 years and 12 hours. Her suit was wrinkled, hair disheveled, face stripped of armor. She saw him and stopped. "You came." "Of course I came. You gave them everything, all our evidence." "You're welcome." Victoria crossed the lobby and did something Garrett hadn't expected. She hugged him. Not a polite gesture, but genuine embrace. Desperate and grateful and human in ways that shattered whatever remaining distance existed between them. "Thank you for believing me, for fighting when I couldn't." Her voice broke. "For reminding me what it feels like to have someone in my corner." They stood in the police station lobby while fluorescent lights hummed and strangers processed past, and something fundamental shifted. No longer CEO and employee, no longer just investigation partners. Something closer and more complicated. "What happens now?" Garrett asked. "Now we wait for forensic accountants to finish examining accounts, for prosecutors to build their case, for the board to decide whether they still want me leading the company." Victoria pulled back, wiping her eyes. "And somehow in all of that, I need to apologize to Breslin for scaring her. This was probably all over the news." "She doesn't watch news. Casey kept her away from it, but yeah, you'll need to explain." "I don't know how to explain to an 8-year-old that I was arrested for crimes I didn't commit." "You tell her the truth, that bad people tried to blame you for things they did, but good people stopped them. She'll understand." Victoria nodded and Garrett drove her back to her apartment. The building looked the same. Marble floors, doorman, quiet that came from walls thick enough to block out the world. But Victoria moved through it differently now, like someone returning to a place that no longer felt like home. In her apartment, she collapsed on the couch with exhaustion that went beyond physical. "They're going to try to remove me Monday. Emergency board meeting. Margaret Morrison is leading the charge. Says the company needs leadership without scandal attached." "After you expose the fraud?" "Because I exposed the fraud, they're scared of more investigations, more arrests, more media attention. They want someone who can present a clean image." "That's insane. That's corporate politics." Victoria closed her eyes. "I might lose everything Monday. The company I built, the identity I've constructed my entire adult life around. And the terrifying part is," she opened her eyes, looked at Garrett. "The terrifying part is I'm not sure I care as much as I should. Because sitting here knowing you're here, knowing Breslin would be happy to see me despite everything, that feels more important than any board vote." Garrett sat beside her. "Monday's vote doesn't define you, win or lose. You are still the person who fought corruption and protected employees. That matters more than a title." "Does it? Because right now I feel like I'm drowning, and the only solid thing is you and Breslin. And that scares me because I've spent 45 years not needing anyone. Maybe it's time to start needing people." They sat in silence until Victoria's exhaustion pulled her towards sleep. Garrett called Casey to check on Breslin, confirmed his daughter was fine, then settled on Victoria's couch to wait out the night. He wasn't leaving her alone. Not tonight. Saturday brought news coverage and speculation, and Garrett fielding calls from reporters who'd somehow gotten his number. He ignored them all and focused on keeping Victoria grounded. They spent the day in her apartment, ordering takeout, watching movies, existing in a bubble separate from the chaos outside. Sunday, Victoria asked if Breslin could visit. "I need to explain what happened, and she struggled with words. "I need to see her, need to know she's not scared of me now." Garrett brought Breslin over that afternoon. His daughter took one look at Victoria's exhausted face and immediately hugged her. "Daddy said bad people tried to blame you for things you didn't do. That's not fair." "No, sweetheart, it's not fair. But your daddy helped make it right. Are you sad? A little, but I'm okay, especially now that you're here. Breslin pulled back, studying the Victoria's un with the seriousness of a child trying to understand adult complexities. Do you have to leave? Your job? Maybe. There's a meeting tomorrow where people will decide if I can stay. What if they say you have to go? Then I'll find something else to do. I'll still be here. Still be part of your life if you want me to be. I want you to be. Breslin's voice was absolute. You're family now. Family doesn't leave just because jobs change. Victoria's composure shattered. She pulled Breslin close and cried, not polite tears, but deep sobs that came from someone finally letting walls crumble. Garrett watched them hold each other and understood that whatever happened Monday, Victoria had already found something more valuable than any CEO position. Monday morning arrived with inevitability. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. Victoria dressed in her most severe suit, armor for battle, and left the apartment looking like she was walking to her own execution. Garrett went to work but couldn't focus. Every 30 minutes he checked his phone for updates. At 11:47 a.m., a text arrived. They voted to retain me, 4-1. Margaret was the lone dissent. Relief flooded through him. He texted back, "Congratulations, you earned it." Her response came immediately. "We earned it. Couldn't have done this without you." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for December 15th, 4 weeks away, giving prosecutors time to build an airtight case. Until then, life continued in strange new patterns. Garrett worked his new position as operations supervisor, learning to lead people who'd been his peers days earlier. Victoria threw herself into restructuring Hayes Industrial's oversight systems, implementing the reforms she'd promised. And slowly, carefully, they built something that looked like a relationship. They had dinner twice a week, sometimes just the two of them, sometimes with a Breslin. Victoria came to Breslin's soccer games and school events. Garrett spent evenings at Victoria's apartment, talking until midnight about everything and nothing. They hadn't defined what they were doing, hadn't labeled it, but the connection deepened with each conversation. Thanksgiving approached. Casey invited them both to family dinner, and Victoria accepted with visible nervousness. I've never done the big family holiday thing. What if they hate me? They won't hate you. Casey's already warned me she's going to interrogate you, but that's just her way of protecting me. Should I bring something? What's the protocol? You show up. That's the protocol. Thanksgiving dinner was chaos. Casey's family, Garrett and Breslin, Victoria looking deeply uncomfortable surrounded by loud conversations and competing demands. But somewhere between turkey and dessert, she relaxed, laughed at Casey's stories, helped Breslin and her cousins with craft projects, existed as a person instead of a position. After dinner, Casey pulled Garrett aside. She's good for you. Different from Amanda, but good in her own way. Yeah, she is. Is it serious? Getting there. We're taking it slow. She's still learning how to be in a relationship, and I'm still figuring out how to let someone in after Amanda. But you're both trying. That's what matters. Casey squeezed his shoulder. Amanda would approve. She'd want you to be happy. I think I'm starting to be. For the first time in 3 years. December arrived with cold and holiday preparations and the preliminary hearing looming. Garrett testified on December 15th, walking prosecutors through the wire recordings and evidence. Victoria testified separately, precise and unshakable. Warren Thatcher's defense attorneys tried to suggest coercion, tried to imply improper relationships, tried every legal maneuver available. None of it worked. The judge reviewed evidence and ruled there was sufficient cause for trial. Warren Thatcher and Dalton Pierce would face criminal charges. Trial was set for January 20th. That evening, Victoria invited Garrett to her apartment. When he arrived, she transformed the space. Photographs on walls, throw blankets on furniture, actual signs of life instead of sterile perfection. The drawing Breslin had given her was framed and displayed prominently. I've been thinking about what you said, about needing people, about building a life instead of just a career. Victoria gestured around the apartment. This is me trying. It looks good, looks like a home. It's starting to feel like one, especially when you and Breslin are here. She moved closer, nervous energy radiating off her, which brings me to something I wanted to discuss. Garrett's pulse kicked up. What's that? I know we're taking this slow. I know you're still healing from losing Amanda, and I'm still learning how to be someone's partner. But Garrett, she took his hands. I want this, us, not just casually dating. I want to build something real, something permanent. I'm not asking you to move in or get married or make grand declarations. I'm just asking if you're willing to commit to trying, to seeing where this goes without exit strategies or backup plans. Garrett studied her face, the vulnerability there, the hope fighting against fear of rejection. 3 months ago, she'd been a distant CEO. Now she was a woman who dismantled her walls and was standing in the wreckage asking him to help build something new. Yeah, I'm willing to commit to you, to us, to whatever we're building here. Victoria's relief was visible. Good, because I'm terrified and I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'll probably mess this up multiple times, but I want to try anyway. Then we'll mess it up together and figure it out as we go. They kissed, first real kiss, not tentative exploration, but genuine connection. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling with the kind of joy that came from taking risks and having them pay off. I should warn you, Garrett said. Breslin's already decided you're part of the family. She's been asking when you're coming to Christmas dinner. Is that an invitation? If you want it to be. I want it to be. I want all of it. Awkward family dinners and burned holiday cookies and your daughter's butterfly presentations and whatever else comes with being part of your lives. They spent the evening planning Christmas, and for the first time since Amanda died, Garrett felt something like wholeness. Not because Victoria replaced what he'd lost, nothing could replace Amanda, but because she filled different spaces, offered different kinds of connection, reminded him that healing didn't mean forgetting. Christmas came with snow and decorations and Breslin's excitement reaching fever pitch. They celebrated at Garrett's apartment, too small for the group that gathered, but somehow that made it better. Casey's family, Garrett and Breslin, Victoria looking happier than Garrett had ever seen her. They opened presents in pajamas, and when Victoria gave Breslin a telescope, for studying stars and understanding that perspective changes everything, his daughter nearly exploded with joy. Garrett gave Victoria framed photographs from the past 2 months, images of all three of them at various moments, candid shots that captured the family they were becoming. She cried when she opened it. Thank you for this, for everything, for taking a chance on someone who had no idea how to be part of a family. You're learning fast. I have good teachers. The week between Christmas and New Year brought quiet domesticity. They spent evenings together, sometimes at Garrett's apartment, sometimes at Victoria's, building routines and traditions. Breslin started calling Victoria V instead of her full name. Not Mom, not yet, but something that suggested belonging. New Year's Eve, after Breslin was asleep, Garrett and Victoria sat on her balcony watching the city prepare for midnight. Trial starts in 3 weeks, Victoria said quietly. Once that's over, once Warren and Dalton are convicted and everything's settled, I want to talk about next steps, about making this permanent. Permanent how? Moving in together, combining lives, making it official that we're a family. She looked at him. Is that something you'd want, eventually? Yeah, eventually, but let's get through the trial first. Make sure we can handle the stress before we make big decisions. Smart. Victoria leaned against his shoulder. Thank you for being patient with me, for understanding I need to move slowly. Thank you for moving at all, for being willing to try mine. They watched the city count down to midnight, and when the clock struck 12, they kissed while fireworks exploded over downtown. New year, new beginning, new family being built from the wreckage of their separate pasts. January arrived with cold and anticipation. The trial date approached like a deadline, and both Garrett and Victoria felt the tension building. They'd spent 3 months building a relationship in the shadow of investigation and fraud charges. Soon they'd know if that foundation was solid or if removing the external pressure would expose cracks they hadn't noticed. The week before trial, Victoria admitted her fears over dinner. What if we only work because we've been in crisis mode? What if once everything's settled, we realize we don't actually fit? Then we figure it out. But Victoria, we've had plenty of normal moments. Holiday dinners and school events and quiet evenings watching movies. We work in those moments too. I hope you're right. I am right. And after the trial, after everything's resolved, we'll prove it by taking the next step, whatever that looks like. Trial began January 20th. Opening arguments, evidence presentation, witness testimony. Garrett testified about the wire recordings. Victoria explained the investigation. Forensic accountants walked the jury through bank statements and offshore transfers. The defense tried to create reasonable doubt, tried to suggest alternative explanations, tried to protect their clients from inevitable conviction. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Warren Thatcher received 8 years. Dalton Pierce received 5. Both men would serve federal time, their reputations destroyed, their careers obliterated. After the verdict, Victoria gave a brief statement to media about justice being served. Then she came home to the apartment where Garrett and Breslin waited, and she collapsed on the couch with exhaustion. It's over. Actually over. How does it feel? Anticlimactic. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Mostly I just feel tired. Breslin climbed onto the couch beside Victoria. You did good. You protected people. That's what heroes do. I'm not a hero, sweetheart. You are to me. Victoria pulled Breslin close and Garrett watched them together and understood that this was what mattered. Not the trial verdict or the company position or any external validation. This moment, this family, this connection built from honesty and vulnerability and the willingness to try despite being terrified. February would bring new challenges, decisions about moving in together, about making their relationship official, about building something permanent. But tonight they existed in the space after resolution, before the next beginning. 3 broken people who'd found each other and started healing. Not perfect, not simple, but real and worth fighting for. And that was enough. February arrived with the strange quiet that followed storms. The trial was over. Warren Thatcher and Dalton Pierce were in federal custody. Hayes Industrial continued its recovery under Victoria's leadership. And Garrett woke each morning with the unsettling realization that the crisis that had defined the past 3 months had resolved, leaving him to figure out what came next. Victoria seemed to feel the same uncertainty. They had dinner Tuesday evening at her apartment, and she moved around the kitchen with uncharacteristic restlessness. I've been thinking about something, but I'm scared to bring it up because it might be too fast or too much or... Just say it. Victoria stopped moving and faced him. Move in with me. You and Breslin, not as a trial period, not temporarily. Actually move in, combine lives, be a family officially instead of just acting like one. Garrett's pulse kicked up. That's a big step. I know, and if you're not ready, I understand completely. We can keep doing what we're doing for as long as you need. But Garrett, her voice strengthened. I'm ready. I want to wake up with you, here, want Breslin's drawings on my refrigerator permanently. Want to build something real instead of just dating while maintaining separate lives. What changed? A month ago you wanted to wait until after the trial. The trial showed me something. When I was sitting in that courtroom facing the possibility of conviction, the only thing I cared about was whether I'd lose you and Breslin. Not the company, not my reputation. You two. That's when I knew. You're not something I'm trying out. You're who I want to build my life around. Garrett moved closer, taking her hands. I need to talk to Breslin first. This affects her as much as us. If she's not comfortable, then we wait. I wouldn't want to do this if Breslin wasn't fully on board. Victoria squeezed his hands. Just think about it. Talk to her. And whatever you both decide, I'll respect it. That night, after Breslin was in her pajamas and tucked into bed, Garrett sat beside her and explained Victoria's proposal. She wants us to live with her? In her big apartment? Yeah, baby. But only if you're comfortable with it. This is your decision as much as mine. Breslin was quiet for a long moment, her expression serious. Would we still keep our apartment in case it doesn't work? The question revealed the fear underneath. That good things could end, that people you loved could disappear, that safety was temporary. We could keep it for a little while. But Breslin, if we're going to do this, we need to really commit, not have one foot out the door waiting for things to fail. What if they do fail? What if we move in and then Victoria decides she doesn't want us anymore? Garrett pulled his daughter close. Then we'd be pal and we'd figure it out together. But baby, I don't think that's going to happen. Victoria loves you. She loves us. She's not going to suddenly change her mind. How do you know? Because I see how she looks at you, how she shows up for every school event and remembers what you tell her and asks questions because she actually cares about the answers. People don't do that unless they're invested. Breslin nestled against his chest. I'm scared, Daddy. What if I love her like a mom and then something bad happens like with Mommy? There it was, the core fear Breslin had been carrying since Amanda's death. That loving people meant risking unbearable loss. Sweetheart, something bad might happen someday. People get sick or have accidents, and we can't control that. But living scared means missing out on all the good things that happen while we're here. Your mom wouldn't want you to stop loving people because you're afraid of losing them. She'd want me to be brave. She'd want you to be happy. And if being happy means taking risks on people worth the risk, then yeah, she'd want you to be brave. Breslin was quiet for so long, Garrett thought she'd fallen asleep. Then she spoke, her voice small but certain. Okay, let's try. But V has to promise that even if living together is hard, she won't just give up. She has to promise to try to fix things. I think she'd agree to that. They told Victoria the next evening, and her relief was visible. I promise, Breslin, if things get difficult, we work through them. We don't run away. And you'll still come to my school stuff even if you're busy? Every single event. I'll put them on my calendar in permanent ink. Okay then, we can move in. Victoria knelt down to Breslin's eye level. Thank you for trusting me. I know this is scary. It's scary for me too. But I'm so happy you're willing to try. They spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Garrett kept his apartment lease for 3 more months, a safety net that made Breslin feel secure, but they moved most of their belongings to Victoria's place. Breslin got the guest bedroom, which they decorated together with butterfly posters and a bookshelf for her growing collection. Garrett's clothes filled half of Victoria's closet. Their lives merged in small, ordinary ways that felt monumental. The first week was strange. They navigated morning routines, bathroom schedules, breakfast preferences, the chaos of getting an 8-year-old ready for school while 2 adults prepared for work. Victoria struggled with the noise and disruption to her previously orderly life. Garrett struggled with feeling like he was invading her space. Breslin struggled with adjustment anxiety that manifested in clinginess and nightmares. By week 2, small conflicts emerged. Victoria worked late one evening, missing dinner without calling. Garrett left dishes in the sink. Breslin had a meltdown about homework and yelled that she hated living there. They had their first real argument, Victoria and Garrett, not the child, about boundaries and expectations in communication. You can't just disappear into work and ignore that we're waiting for you, Garrett said, his frustration building. Breslin was upset. She'd made a drawing to show you. I had an emergency board meeting. I texted you. You texted at 7:30 that you'd be late. We'd been waiting since 6. I can't always control my schedule. Then we need better communication. Because this isn't just your apartment anymore. It's our home. And that means considering other people before making decisions. Victoria's jaw tightened, and Garrett saw her instinct to retreat, to rebuild walls. Then she took a breath and forced herself to stay present. You're right, I should have called earlier. Should have let you know the meeting was running long. I'm sorry. The apology diffused the tension. They talked through expectations, established guidelines, agreed on house rules that respected everyone's needs. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Week 3 brought improvement. They found rhythm in the chaos. Victoria learned to close her laptop during dinner. Garrett learned to ask before rearranging furniture. Breslin learned that having 2 adults to rely on meant she didn't have to carry all her anxieties alone. One evening, Garrett found Victoria sitting on Breslin's bed, reading her a story. His daughter was curled against Victoria's side, and they both looked content in ways that made his chest ache. This was what he'd been afraid to hope for, not replacing Amanda, but building something new that honored the past while creating space for the future. March arrived with the first hints of spring. They'd been living together a month, and while challenges remained, the foundation felt solid. Breslin had stopped asking when they'd moved back to the old apartment. Garrett had stopped feeling like a guest. Victoria had stopped working 14-hour days and started prioritizing family dinners. One Saturday morning, Victoria made an announcement at breakfast. I want to discuss something with both of you. It's about making this arrangement permanent. Breslin looked up from her cereal. What does permanent mean? It means we stop keeping Garrett's old apartment as backup. It means we commit to being a family for real, not just trying it out. It means, Victoria looked at Garrett, then Breslin. It means I'm all in, completely. And I want to know if you are too. Garrett studied her face. A month ago, Victoria had been terrified of commitment. Now she was proposing they eliminate their safety net, burn the bridges that would let them retreat if things got hard. That's a big decision. Are you sure you're ready? I'm sure that I want this more than I've wanted anything in 20 years. I'm sure that waking up with you both here feels more like home than any apartment I've lived in. I'm sure that whatever challenges come, I want to face them with you. Victoria's voice was steady. But I need to know you feel the same. Both of you. Breslin spoke first. I want to stay. I like living here. I like having V at bedtime and breakfast, and when I come home from school, it feels safe. Garrett felt emotion catch in his throat. Yeah, I'm ready. Let's make it permanent. Victoria smiled, genuine, unguarded joy. Okay then, family meeting decision. We let the old apartment lease expire. This is home now. They spent the rest of March settling into permanence. Garrett officially terminated his old lease. They combined finances, opened joint accounts, made decisions about furniture and decorations that reflected all three of them rather than just Victoria's minimalist aesthetic. The apartment transformed further. Photographs everywhere, Breslin's artwork covering walls, signs of life in every room. But permanence also meant facing harder questions. One evening after Breslin was asleep, Victoria brought up something she'd clearly been anxious about. I want to talk about the future, about what happens if something goes wrong. What do you mean? I mean if we break up, if this doesn't work long term, we need to discuss custody arrangements for Breslin. Garrett's stomach dropped. Custody? She's my daughter. You don't have legal rights. I know, but Garrett, if something happened to you, if you got sick or had an accident, what happens to Breslin? Does she go to Casey? Does she have any connection to me? Victoria's voice was tight. I'm not trying to take her from you. I'm trying to make sure that if the worst happens, she has stability, has me in her life if she wants that. The conversation was uncomfortable but necessary. They talked through scenarios, agreed that Garrett would update his will to include Victoria as potential guardian if Casey couldn't take Breslin, talked about co-parenting arrangements if they ever separated, made plans for contingencies neither wanted to imagine. This feels morbid, Garrett said. This feels responsible. Because I love her, and I need to know she'd be protected. The fact that Victoria was thinking years ahead, planning for Breslin's welfare, even in worst-case scenarios, told Garrett everything he needed to know about her commitment. She wasn't just playing house. She was building a life with long-term intention. April arrived with warming weather and Breslin's 9th birthday approaching. They planned a party at the apartment. School friends, family, the celebration of a child who'd survived loss and was learning to thrive again. The morning of Breslin's birthday, Garrett woke to find Victoria already up, decorating the living room with streamers and balloons. She looked nervous. I've never done a kid's birthday party before. What if I mess it up? You won't mess it up. Breslin's just happy you're here. I got her a present, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate. It might be too much. Victoria showed him the gift, a professional telescope, not the toy version she'd given at Christmas, but a real instrument for serious stargazing. Expensive, thoughtful, exactly the kind of thing that would make Breslin cry with happiness. It's perfect. You're sure? I don't want to overstep. I'm not trying to compete with you or Victoria, stop. You're part of this family. You're allowed to give her amazing gifts. The party was chaos in the best way. 15 children screaming through the apartment, playing games, eating cake that Victoria had attempted to bake, and that had come out lopsided but delicious. Breslin opened presents with the enthusiasm of someone who understood that material things mattered less than the people giving them. When she opened Victoria's telescope, she went very still. This is a real one, like for actual space watching. For actual space watching, Victoria confirmed. I thought maybe we could learn together, study constellations, figure out what we're looking at. Breslin launched herself at Victoria, hugging with the fierce totality of childhood love. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're welcome, sweetheart. Later, after the party had ended and Breslin was asleep in her bed surrounded by new toys and birthday cards, Garrett and Victoria cleaned up the wreckage of celebration. That was good, Victoria said, surveying the apartment. Exhausting, but good. You did great. Breslin had an amazing day. I can't believe she's 9. I've only known her 5 months, but it feels like she's been part of my life forever. Garrett set down the trash bag he'd been filling and moved to where Victoria stood. I need to tell you something. And I've been waiting for the right time, but I don't think there is a right time for this, so I'm just going to say it. Victoria turned to face him, expression uncertain. That sounds ominous. It's not. It's the opposite. Garrett took her hands. I love you. I'm in love with you. Not just grateful for what you've done or attached because of the investigation or any other explanation that makes it less scary. I love who you are, the parts you show the world and the parts you keep hidden. I love how hard you try with Breslin, even when you're terrified of messing up. I love that you rebuilt your entire life because an 8-year-old told you people were more important than work. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. I've been scared to say it because I've never said it and meant it the way I mean it with you. But Garrett, her voice strengthened, you and Breslin are my family, my home, the thing I want to protect more than any company or title or achievement. You're my everything. They kissed, and it felt like sealing a promise. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling through tears. I never thought I'd have this. I spent so many years convinced I was too damaged, too broken, too fundamentally wrong for connection. And then you showed up in a parking lot with a dead battery and somehow saw past all my defenses to someone worth knowing. You were always worth knowing. You just needed to believe it yourself. They finished cleaning in comfortable silence, and when they finally went to bed, Victoria curled against Garrett's side with the contentment of someone who'd found where they belonged. The next morning, Breslin appeared at their bedroom door holding her new telescope. Can we go outside and look at stars tonight? All 3 of us? Absolutely, Victoria said. We'll make it a tradition. Sunday night stargazing. Promise? Promise. Breslin climbed into bed between them, something she hadn't done since they'd moved in, respecting their privacy, but birthday rules apparently overrode normal boundaries. And they lay together as morning light filtered through windows. V, Breslin's voice was quiet. Can I call you Mom? Not all the time, but sometimes. I still have my real mom in heaven, but you're my Earth mom. Is that okay? Victoria's breath caught. She looked at Garrett, who nodded encouragement, then back at Breslin. That would be more than okay. That would be an honor. Okay, then you're Mom V, my bonus mom. Bonus mom, I like that. They spent the rest of the morning in bed, talking about nothing important, existing in the space of family that had been built from loss and loneliness and the courage to try again. Eventually they got up, made breakfast, burned pancakes because some traditions were worth maintaining, and started another ordinary day that felt extraordinary in its normalcy. Over the next few weeks, they settled into their new identity. Garrett and Victoria were partners, co-parents, people building a life together with intention and care. Breslin thrived with the stability of 2 adults who were present and committed. Hayes Industrial continued its recovery under Victoria's leadership, but she'd learned to delegate, to trust others, to recognize that her worth wasn't defined by her work. Sunday nights became sacred. They'd go to a nearby park with a telescope, spread blankets on the grass, and study stars while Breslin asked questions, and Victoria looked up answers, and Garrett watched his daughter learn to dream beyond Earth's boundaries. One Sunday evening in late April, as they packed up to leave, Breslin made an observation. We're like butterflies. We were all caterpillars before, separate and stuck. Then we went into chrysalises and got all melted and broken, and now we're butterflies flying together. That's very poetic, baby bear. I learned it from V. She taught me that transformation is hard but worth it. Victoria ruffled Breslin's hair. You taught me that, actually. I just learned to listen. On the drive home with Breslin asleep in the watch seat and Victoria's hand in his, Garrett reflected on the past 6 months. Last October, he'd been a man drowning in exhaustion and poverty, convinced his life would never improve. Victoria had been a lonely executive who'd built an empire and lost her humanity in the process. Breslin had been a child learning to live with grief and the fear that everyone she loved would disappear. Now they were something else. A family that didn't fit traditional definitions, but worked anyway. People who'd been broken in different ways and had found healing in each other's company. Not perfect, they still had arguments about Victoria working too late and Garrett being too overprotective and Breslin occasionally testing boundaries like any 9-year-old. But real, honest, worth fighting for. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked. "How far we've come, how different everything is." Good different or scary different? Both, but mostly good. They reached their apartment building, no longer Victoria's apartment, but theirs, the home they'd built together, and carried Breslin upstairs. She woke briefly as they tucked her in. "Love you, Daddy. Love you, Mom V. Love you too, sweetheart," they said together. In their bedroom, Victoria pulled Garrett close. "Thank you." "For what?" "For teaching me that walls are just prisons we build ourselves. For showing me that vulnerability isn't weakness. For bringing Breslin into my life and letting me be part of hers. For," her voice caught, "for loving me even when I was terrible at being loved." "You're not terrible at it anymore. You're actually pretty great at it." "I had good teachers." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and if either dreamed, it was of ordinary futures, school events and family dinners, and the small accumulations of daily life that built something lasting. No more crises to survive, no more investigations to navigate, no more walls to dismantle. Just the ongoing work of showing up for each other, choosing connection over isolation, being brave enough to love despite knowing that loss was always possible. The next morning, Victoria woke before dawn and slipped out to the balcony with coffee. Garrett found her there 20 minutes later, watching the city wake. "Couldn't sleep?" "Didn't want to. I wanted to enjoy this feeling of contentment. I've spent so many years chasing the next goal, the next achievement, never stopping to appreciate what I already had. I don't want to do that anymore." Garrett stood beside her, and they watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Below them, the city continued its eternal motion, people starting their days, facing their challenges, building their lives one choice at a time. "I used to think success meant building something that would outlast me," Victoria said quietly. "A company with my name on it, a legacy that would matter after I was gone. But I was wrong. Success is this: standing on a balcony with someone I love, knowing his daughter is sleeping safely inside, having a family that chose me not because of what I built, but because of who I'm becoming. That's the legacy that matters." That's very philosophical for 6 in the morning. Breslin's rubbing off on me, all her butterfly wisdom. They went inside to start another ordinary day. Breakfast, getting Breslin ready for school, Victoria heading to Hayes Industrial, Garrett managing his operations team. But underneath the routine lived the knowledge that they'd built something rare and precious from the wreckage of their separate pasts. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and worth protecting and filled with the kind of love that came from choosing each other daily, from showing up even when it was hard, from being brave enough to transform. 3 people who'd been caterpillars stuck in their separate struggles, who'd gone through chrysalises of grief and loneliness and systematic exploitation, who'd emerged as something new and capable of flight. Not because transformation was easy or painless or guaranteed, but because they'd been willing to endure the breaking down to experience the building back up. And that, in the end, was what mattered most. Not the destination, but the courage to begin the journey. Not the finished product, but the willingness to let yourself be unmade and remade. Not the perfect family, but the real one, built from honesty and vulnerability and the understanding that people, not work, not money, not achievement, but people, were always the most important thing. They'd learned that lesson the hard way. But having learned it, they held on to it fiercely, protecting what they'd built with the same determination Victoria had once applied to building her company and Garrett had once applied to surviving each day. And in that protection, in that daily choice to show up and try and be present, they found something that looked like happiness. Imperfect, hard-won, occasionally messy, but utterly and completely real.